They found it in a desolate area of Manchester called Hume, the West Indian flavoured Russell Club. It would be theirs on Friday nights only. Alan Erasmus suggested on that night it should be called The Factory.
Alan was the bright one, because Alan saw a sign one day. It said, "Factory closing." I said, "Oh, we'll call the new club The Factory, because then we'll have a factory opening."
Factory couldn't have been Factory without Erasmus, possibly because it was absolutely his idea. You know, sometimes I think he's like Ringo Starr, and that was his role in the group, turn up for tea and cakes. And then other times I think he was like Engels, and he was the guy that allowed Marx to actually have all the ideas. Do you know what I mean? So there's, you know, and somewhere in the middle, between, you know, there's a missing link between Ringo Starr and Engels, you know.
Even a modest venture needs to be publicised. Enter the third factory partner, Peter Saville, an art school student who was about to put the entire history of 20th century design at the service of post-punk graphics. It all started with his poster for the first factory nights. He had no experience of designing rock gig posters as such.
I kind of immediately knew what I wanted to use. Every day at college for the last year or so, I'd passed a sign on a workshop door. It was a sign saying use hearing protection. It was a beautiful sign. And as soon as Tony said, well, yes, do a poster for a music venue which is called The Factory, the use hearing protection sign seemed unavoidable.
Factory nights at the Russell Club were often empty, bleak affairs. But in the DIY spirit of punk, Wilson decided to put some of the bands on vinyl. Wilson and Erasmus co-opted Joy Division for the first recordings, with the agreement of their new manager, Rob Gretton. A deal was scribbled on a napkin and signed with Wilson's own blood. He would own nothing of the musicians' work, give them a 50-50 profit split and total freedom. An unprecedented deal that will become the key business principle of the new Factory Records.
I now believe completely differently that musicians are all tossers, every single one of them, but unfortunately they are given this godlike gift of writing wonderful music, without which none of us would be here. So I'm willing to allow them that, but it doesn't allow them to behave like cunts.
Tony used to say, look, not only to us, but to everybody, if you don't like it, you know what you can do.
Yeah, his phrase was the freedom to fuck off. that was how he put it to us. It's so much more valuable than having it tied into a contract and advances and all those hindrances. You have the freedom to fuck off at any point.
The first factory release was packaged by hand here in Alan Erasmus's flat in Palatine Road. It would serve as the business centre of Factory for the next 12 years. The sleeve, a beautiful, complicated affair containing 2 EPs, thermally sealed in plastic, was designed by Peter Saville.
It would probably have been cheaper to just follow the industry standard and fold up some bits of paper and glue them. But we didn't know.
We had to fold them into 8, and then we had to put them in these polythene film, and then we had to seal it by hand with these thermal presses. I can remember Nathan McGough couldn't even work the bloody machine. He was hopeless. He actually got sacked from putting records in sleeves.
I mean, no one knew how to do anything properly. So we found, so you find your own way of doing it.
The double EP was catalogued as Fac 2, Fac 1 being Saville's original poster for the Russell Club. From that point on, the company numbered everything it touched.
Having a label that has this whole kind of look, this whole numbering system, this whole ethos, this whole idea behind it, that's genius. That, it was almost like the label was like a band. It had a manifesto, which a lot of labels didn't have at the time.
The main manifesto of the day was that Britain under Labour wasn't working. Margaret Thatcher was travelling the length and breadth of the country to remind us. While Wilson's factory was expanding, others were going on strike. There was no rubbish collection, no petrol, no food in the supermarkets, no trains, and no planes. Even the dead had to wait in line. But in Manchester, Wilson found his fourth partner, a local record producer who often worked here at Strawberry Studios, Martin Hannett, Manchester's aspiring Phil Spector.
I mean, it's unbelievable, but we had a producer, because you didn't think of a record producer living locally. It seemed bizarre that, you know, George Martin or Brian Eno or whatever, John Cale, would be living locally.
Hannett had produced one record, the Buzzcocks debut EP, Spiral Scratch.
You could get any band, and that band could have been together for as long as you like. They could have been together for 4 weeks or 40 years, and if they were getting on, Martin Hannett would have them at each other's throats within 2 days.
Part of working with Martin was the fact that he made it hard to do. It was like doing a complicated puzzle. Right, what number am I thinking of now? It's a colour.
Wind the drummer up as much as possible, because his theory was if a drummer is annoyed, they hit the drums harder, and when they hit the drums harder, they sound better.
You were never present when he was mixing, because what he would do when he was mixing would be to change everything that you thought would be, you know, that what you thought would be the verse would have become the chorus, and vice versa.
He didn't have a clue, you wouldn't have thought, because what was his experience? You know, he had no experience as such.
Hannett became Factory's in-house record producer, defining and refining the sound of the label's fledgling acts. Like his new partners, he had a game plan.
A lot of it is psychological games, and, you know, Brian Eno's great production of U2 in a way is writing them a letter saying he doesn't want his name on the album, it's no good, go away and do it again. You know, it's like it's art theories in a way, it's conceptualizing.
This was a factory created by thinkers to produce music that would fuse intellectual ideals with the new sounds of the street. Wilson, in particular, was an anarchist academic.
I used to have conversations with him about stuff, and he was into this situationism business. And which I never...
Be a connoisseur of irony.
I never got to the bottom of that. I'll have to ask him again.
He gets these kind of heavy-duty ideas, and he says them in a really pretentious way, and that's what rubs people up the wrong way. But I think that's quite cool as well, because everyone should just be themselves. You know what I mean? There's space in punk rock for people to be really, really dumb. There's also space in punk rock for people to be really, really intellectual as well.
He knows people think he's a wanker, and he is in a lot of ways. He'd say the most inappropriate things, because we're proper Mancunians as well. I know he's a Mancunian, but he's been to Oxford or Cambridge, I can't remember. Yeah, but he's intelligent, but he is posh. He's all right being intelligent, but he was a posh boy, and he knew that, and I think he wanted to be one of the lads, really.
Rob Gretton, more football hooligan than situationist sympathiser.